Welcome to ClearPath Retirement Radio. From retirement income and tax planning to protecting the savings you've worked a lifetime to build, this is real-world financial talk designed for real people. People who want clear answers, not sales pitches, so you can make informed decisions and plan for retirement with confidence. Now, here are your hosts, Stewart Smith and Mitch Davies.
Good morning and welcome to ClearPath Retirement Radio. I am Stewart Smith here with Mitch Davies.
Good morning, guys.
And we have a great show for you guys today. This one is going to be all about Social Security decisions that can cost or make you hundreds of thousands.
That's right, man. I'm excited. This is going to be a good one.
Yeah, people don't know. Social Security is a very, very important decision that people make, and it's not just a simple age decision, it's a long-term income strategy.
That's exactly right. And there's so many ways that it can interact with other assets that you've built up. And when it comes to retirement income planning, it's so important to look at it in a wider lens. So I'm excited. This is going to be a lot of good stuff to talk about today.
Yeah, so couple things about Social Security important to understand, and the first one is this is one of the few financial decisions you can't undo, meaning you make that decision, it's made, and there is a kind of one little get out of jail free card, I guess they would call it, where if you change your mind in that first year, you can go back and undo that decision as long as it's within 12 months. But the caveat to that, Mitch, is you have to pay back every penny they paid you and then hit the reset button. And a lot of people, once they've received that money, it's hard to pay it back, isn't it?
It's hard, man. And it's, like we talked about last week, this is another situation where they're not calling you and letting you know you can do this, right? A lot of people will start it and not really understand, it's probably hidden in the fine print somewhere, but they're not like, hey, heads up, you can undo this if you want. So another situation where it's very unlikely to, happen. A lot of people don't even know about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can tell you that, a lot of folks come into us and they've thought through this somewhat and they kind of do these, what we would call a break-even analysis. And what I mean by that is they've kind of done the math on, does it make sense to get smaller checks for a longer period of time or larger checks for a shorter period of time, and where that kind of crosses over age-wise. And, I wish it was that simple, Mitch.
We see it every week, man. They're so excited to come in and say, hey, we did the math. If I live till this age, I'm good. I'm making money. They come in and they've got it all figured out, but it's not that simple. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. And so we're going to go through those today. We're going to get real clear on some of the strategies that make sense for folks out there. But there's a lot of moving parts here. And, since, they started taxing Social Security, which has been quite a while now, you could potentially be in a situation where 85% of that Social Security payment gets taxed as regular income. So that's one of the moving parts I think people don't really consider in enough depth before they make this decision. We see a lot of folks come in and they're like, hey, I'm turning 62, I'm still working, but why wouldn't I just go ahead and cut on this check and just put it in savings so that I have this extra money coming in? And that is absolutely one of the biggest mistakes we see.
It is, Stewart. And not only, there's two things working against you there, right? There's the taxation of it, which, we're talking about now. And there's another component where you're actually penalized. You can be reduced some of that benefit if you're still working and under certain age thresholds. We'll talk about that later, but they've started making this more complicated, especially once taxation got introduced. So it's very important to, like Stewart said, you don't want to just rush into this. It's not a simple math problem. There's a ton of other things outside of the break even that everyone finds online with these calculators. It's a great start, but there's so much more to talk about.
There is. And you can start with the fact that early filing, we call it, and that would be the first opportunity you get to file and start receiving Social Security is at age 62 currently. And early filing is, rarely works in your benefit. your benefits are reduced at that point by somewhere in that 25 to 30% range permanently. And that is a big haircut to take when it comes to a guaranteed income stream that you're going to be receiving for the rest of your life. But even beyond that, Mitch, one of the things that we like to bring up to folks is that, hey, you're not only reducing the benefits for yourself for life, but hey, you're reducing the benefits for your spouse as well.
That's extremely important, Stewart.
In most cases. So, especially when they're the higher earner in that couple, because what happens when a married couple is receiving Social Security benefits and one of them passes away?
Great question, Stewart. So when one passes away, if you're both receiving benefits, when one of the spouses passes away, the remaining spouse gets the higher of the two Social Securities.
That's right. Now,
that's extremely important to understand because, like Stewart mentioned, you're making that decision for both. And there's another component to this where if, like you mentioned, where if you're going to be taking the spousal benefit and you're going to be claiming benefit based on the other spouse's benefit, then you can be permanently reducing that in another way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And these are just things, to clarify what Mitch is saying is, and a lot of people don't even know about the spousal benefits, so let's break that down a little bit.
Sure.
So, let's say that you have one spouse who is a higher income earner and one that just never really worked or paid into the system, and in that circumstances, or worked very little and has a very small Social Security benefit. They can, instead of electing their own benefit, once their spouse is full retirement age and elects their benefit, they have to wait until that the higher earner elects their benefit. They can choose to do what's called the spousal benefit at that time. And the spousal benefit is half of what their spouse is getting in Social Security.
Right.
We see this mistake all the time where, we'll come in and we'll be going through just what we call discovery with our clients, where we're just asking a lot of questions and getting to understand their situation intimately. And when I ask them what they're currently drawing in Social Security payments, and one of them says, well, I'm drawing $3,000 a month, and the other one says they're drawing $800 a month, we know there's an issue almost immediately, right?
Right.
If that lower earner is not drawing at least half of what the higher earning spouse is getting, they're missing out on quite a bit of money. In that circumstance I just gave you, that's a considerable cut from the $1,500 that lower earning spouse could be getting with the spousal benefit. And a lot of people they don't have any clue about this.
No, they don't. And, if you catch that and try to switch, is the IRS going to pay you back all that missed earnings that you might have missed for some years?
Unfortunately, no. No, that is not the way it works. And so, sometimes we're able to catch that early on and go ahead and get that spousal benefit elected for them and get them the higher check coming in every month. And, these are just one of the mistakes that we see people making. But, I think the other big mistake people make is they think that when they go to elect their Social Security benefit, that the Social Security office is going to give them advice and help them to make sure they optimize their benefit. And we both know from experience that not only do they not give you advice, and not only will they not tell you if there's a more optimal strategy, they're not allowed to.
They can't. It's purely transactional, right? You're gonna make an appointment with the Social Security office, and you're gonna say, "Hey, I'm ready to take the benefit," and they're gonna say, "Okay, here's the data we need," and it's gonna begin. They're not going to tell you, hey, if you wait an extra 3 days, you're going to get into the next month. They're not going to tell you anything. And they don't want to give advice. They don't want to be held liable for any advice. They don't want to say anything. So they're just going to transact. And they're not going to give you any guidance there. And it's a permanent decision that you've spent 30, 40 years building into a system for. You think they'd help you out some and try to optimize it, but they don't. And once, like Stewart said, once you're in this is a lifetime decision.
It's a lifetime decision. You need to understand that. And we don't want you making lifetime mistakes on this.
Yeah.
And, we see it all the time where just simple claiming strategies are not understood. I mean, we do workshops on this. We do free educational workshops where we teach folks about claiming strategies and how to optimize Social Security. And it never ceases to amaze me when we come out of one of these workshops, people are just absolutely, amazed that there is these spousal benefits and things that we bring up in the workshop that they've never even considered when they were making these type of decisions. And unfortunately, at times it's too late, and we're not able to correct those. And so it's really interesting. And so that's what this show is going to be all about today, is helping you to understand these things on the front end before you go making these and really impactful, important decisions for you and potentially a spouse. And again, if you are the higher earning spouse and you are electing your benefit early, just understand that you are not only taking a reduced benefit for yourself, but also a reduced benefit for your spouse, and that's a lifetime decision you're making.
I think that's where people come out with the most clarity when they probably didn't think of it at the time. When we do those workshops and we come out and people are like, I thought I was just taking income. I didn't realize the implications that this could affect my spouse 30 years from now, right? It's so important.
Yeah. And if you think that if you're wondering about your strategy and you're wondering if it's optimal and you want to know if there's a better way to do this, just go to ClearPathRetirement.com, hit that Get Started button today. Let's set up a time to sit down and have just a real frank discussion about this and how we can help you optimize that strategy. We'll be right back. Hey, are you approaching the distribution phase of life where it's time to turn the assets you've worked so hard to accumulate into a reliable retirement income? And are you unsure how to do that in the most tax-efficient way possible? At ClearPath Retirement Planning, we help retirees and pre-retirees design income strategies that aim to reduce taxes, manage risk, and create confidence in retirement. Visit ClearPathRetirement.com to schedule a complimentary consultation.
Thanks for tuning in to ClearPath Retirement Radio with Stewart Smith and Mitch Davies. Let's get back to the show.
Hey guys, welcome back to ClearPath Retirement Radio. I am your host, Stewart Smith, with Mitch Davies here, as usual. And, we are a locally owned, South Carolinian owned retirement planning firm here based in Greenville, South Carolina. We are veteran owned and operated, and if that means something to you and you want to work with people who are local, people who you can come sit down with and look eye to eye with and have real courageous conversations about your retirement and what that could look like, and really start to get clarity and be able to make those retirement decisions with clarity and confidence of knowing you're going to be okay, and no matter what comes at you, you're going to be able to handle it. We're your guys.
That's right, Stewart.
And today we are having a really great discussion on a topic that gets brought up again and again with clients and prospects on Social Security decisions and how they can make or break you in retirement, costing you potentially or helping you make potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that is our discussion today. One of the things that we'll mention is that if you choose to go early at age 62, we mentioned you're taking a reduced benefit in the realm of 25 to 30% reduction permanently for the rest of your life. And if you do that and you are the higher income earner in your marriage, then you are not only taking that reduced benefit for yourself, but you're also taking that reduced benefit for your spouse. So something to think about there, and we want you to make sure that we put that on your radar. But second, if you do choose to go at full retirement age, and for most folks listening to this show, that's going to be in the 66 to 67 age range. And if you do choose to go at full retirement age, then you will get, what we call your baseline benefit, 100% of your full retirement benefit. And, that's important when you're looking at like a spousal benefit, where your spouse is going to be taking the spousal benefit, which would be half of yours. And if your spouse hasn't worked that much in the workforce and is looking at a much lower benefit than half of your Social Security, you definitely want to elect that spousal benefit and let them at least get half of yours. But even beyond that, Mitch, if you go from, let's say your full retirement age is age 67, if you push it off till age 70, which is when you have to declare, there's no reason to wait later than age 70, you're looking at an 8% annual increase each year of how much money you can get on an annual basis for the rest of your life. And not only that 8% increase, but also cost of living adjustments that are included in those 3 years. So, you're looking at about a 75 to 80% higher benefit than if you would have elected at age 62. You're also giving your spouse the highest possible survivor benefit.
That's huge.
So, those are huge things to be thinking about, because most people, when they get to the age of 67, they're not going to be super aggressive in their allocations and how they invest money. Right. So to be guaranteed 8% plus cost of living adjustments for 3 years would really be difficult to attain at that age. And, if you look at it like, hey, I may just take and start spending my IRA money or, money that I've saved to bridge me from that age 67 up to age 70 and then elect, then basically what you're doing is giving yourself 8% guaranteed return a year plus cost of living adjustments. And I don't know that doesn't make sense for most people.
It makes a lot of sense, Stewart. And, we go through this all the time at the office with clients, and I like to say, think of Social Security as an asset. Think of Social Security like an asset. It's got the same fundamentals of an asset. You've spent a long time building into it. You're contributing into this bucket of money that you're inevitably going to take for the rest of your life. It's really no different than a 401k in that regard, right? People will spend all this time trying to figure out the optimal withdrawal strategy for a 401k and how to make the most money. But to have a guaranteed bucket of money that you can, again, get an 8% in inflation roll up on plus inflation adjustments, and that can be 10, 11% right there. To have that, a guaranteed bucket that you can do that, you need to treat it like an asset, and we need to plan for it like it's an asset, because once we make that decision, we can't undo it. So when you start looking at retirement income planning with this as an asset rather than just, I'm about to retire, let me take my Social Security, it allows for so much more strategy and so much more planning.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, where we see that strategy doesn't make sense is in the rare instance where we're sitting with someone and we're talking about their longevity in their family, we're talking about their health status, and it becomes very evident to us really clearly that not only are they in poor health and don't have some issue going on that is going to impact their life expectancy significantly, but maybe they also say, hey, Stewart, everybody, my father, my mother, they all passed away in their early 70s, that sort of thing. Those things obviously impact. And if you're in that situation, I think it's pretty much a no-brainer. You're going to take it as soon as you can, and you're going to try to get as many checks as you can dealing with those type of variables. But, those are rare. That is a rare circumstance. I think the other circumstance where we see that potentially that strategy of waiting till age 70 doesn't make sense is when someone is in a very fixed income situation where they don't have a lot of assets and they need immediate income replacement the minute that they retire, as far as maybe they're going to retire at 65 and they need a check coming in immediately. There is no way to lean on assets to get them to a later time frame. And so, if you're in those circumstances, maybe it makes sense to go ahead and elect earlier than age 70. But if you have longevity in your family, and I mean, if people are living into their mid to late 80s, more than likely, I mean, doing it at age 70 is a huge deal because, I mean, it's the only guaranteed inflation adjusted income source that is backed by the U.S. government that is a lifetime guarantee that you're going to get. So down the road, if you have some assets and down the road, maybe in your mid to late 80s, now all of a sudden you need long-term care. You need to go into a skilled nursing care facility and receive some very expensive care. Having that higher Social Security will certainly help the picture there.
Absolutely, Stewart. And this is why our number one rule at the firm is never take cocktail party advice, is what we call it. This is that advice where you're just talking to a friend and they're like, hey, I found this calculator online. You need to do this, and this will tell you the age you need to take it. I had a conversation like that a few weeks ago. And a client was like, hey, my friend said I need to use this guy on YouTube. He has a great calculator. And we did the calculator, and she said, 68 and a half is the perfect age for me based on the math. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about your cash flow for a bit. You're about to retire at 67. How does cash flow look? Well, we might have some gaps there. Okay, let's talk about family health. Let's talk about these things. And once you talk about these things, I mean, we could almost throw the calculator out the window because of the things you just mentioned. So the most important takeaway here, guys, is that no matter what some break-even math says, there's so much more factors to consider.
Yeah, and that is a dangerous situation when people use these general calculators and take general advice on this stuff. Yeah. I mean, everybody has very unique circumstances. Everybody's at different asset levels. Everybody has different income sources. Everybody's health is dramatically different from one person to the next. And so, we always recommend, listen, sit down with someone who's really understands all of the moving parts when it comes to this type of decision, and really make sure that you're working through all of the different aspects that need to be addressed before you go and make a really important decision that, like we keep saying over and over again, cannot be undone. This is a permanent decision for you. So when we talk about key factors that should drive the decision, I would say, again, it has a lot to do with your life expectancy and your current health. Those are obviously very important factors. When we run break-even analysis for folks, typically they break even, if you're just talking about just straight break-even analysis, none of these other factors involved, they typically break even in that 78 to 82 age range. Yeah. But the real risk there is living longer than expected. And, married couples, probably at least one spouse lives into their 90s. It's very, very high statistically to see that nowadays. And, so this is a decision that needs to be made with very much care. And if you're struggling with this decision and you just really don't know what the optimal strategy is for your Social Security, and you and your spouse want to sit down with people who have been doing this, myself, for 2.5 decades now, of helping people optimize this and figure out the absolute best way to do this, then please go visit our website, ClearPathRetirement.com. You can call our office, 864-775-5033. We are a local upstate business that is based here in the upstate, and we'd love to hear from you. We'll be right back to talk more about Social Security. Retirement planning isn't just about growing money. It's about using it wisely, generating income, managing taxes, planning for healthcare costs, protecting your legacy. At ClearPath Retirement Planning, we specialize in helping retirees and pre-retirees transition from accumulation to distribution with confidence and clarity. If you're approaching retirement and want a plan, not just opinions, discover the ClearPath difference. Visit clearpathretirement.com today.
Welcome to ClearPath Retirement Radio. From retirement income and tax planning to protecting the savings you've worked a lifetime to build, this is real-world financial talk designed for real people. People who want clear answers, not sales pitches, so you can make informed decisions and plan for retirement with confidence. Now, here are your hosts, Stewart Smith and Mitch Davies.
Welcome back to ClearPath Retirement Radio. I am your host, Stewart Smith, and I am here with Mitch Davies, and we are ready for Mitch's Market Minute this week. Mitch, update us on those markets.
Thanks, Stewart. I'm excited as always. So what we're going to do is stick to our same structure. We're going to talk about what's been going on in the markets overall, what we're expecting over the next month, 2 months, and then what are we focused on? What are we talking to clients about every week? Again, this is something I do for clients weekly as well, these kind of updates. And what are we focused on, Stewart? So first of all, where we're at, the last few days have been good. We've had some good days finally. It's been a tough month of March. Actually very similar, almost eerily similar to what we saw last year, where we had a huge dip in March and then things started to recover right around April. March actually historically is a pretty bad month in the market, but S&P is sitting right around 6,500, the Nasdaq's just under 22,000, and that VIX, that volatility index that we talked about a couple times before, which again is just a gauge of how volatile things are. How much is the market expecting fluctuation, and what we're going to see these big red, big green days, and it's still high, but it's starting to come down. So what that tells us is things are starting to get a little more comfortable. We're still not there. We still have that high VIX, and we still have the conflict overseas. This is where this is all driving from. But we're starting to see some de-escalation talks get thrown around. Nothing official. Nothing's confirmed, but we started to see from the U.S.'s side as well as Iran's side some talks about, okay, maybe we're willing to start slowing this down. And what we've seen and what we've been preaching is that the market condition right now is almost solely news-based. It's solely just headline, we call it headline markets, where the market's almost waiting for some kind of update, some kind of information about the conflict to react. And we're seeing a lot of consolidation, a lot of just steady trading until there's some news, and then it breaks out one way or breaks out the other way. And what these times feel like are hard. These are the kind of times where we see the most fear, right? We get the most clients saying, hey, should we be doing something different? Is everything okay? And our job, Stewart, as advisors is to understand what these situations have done historically and understand what these situations likely will do after. And something I've been talking about a lot is, historically, when we see situations like this, when we see headline-driven markets, you can look back in the last 10 years, and we've had a lot of events like this, right? We've had COVID. We had, the tariffs last year. We've had rate hikes starting in 2021 that were super dramatic. We had, a lot of bank issues prior to that. We've had a lot of reasons to be fearful. But what we've seen is the history is very straightforward and very clear on what has happened. If we look at 20 of the last major geopolitical events, this is super interesting. 19 of them have recovered within the next 3 to 6 months, which is very important to understand because in the time, it always feels like this is the worst we've seen. COVID, the world was shut down, right?
Right.
We had a 3-month dip during that time. And 3 months after that, the market was well above where it was prior to that. That was an insane time of life, right? So the point is, this is no different. While it feels hectic, and you see the news headlines that are very, scary, and we're uncertain. And of course, there's other factors. There's inflation, but there's always other factors, right? Whenever there's a lot of conflict going on, we see the price of oil go up. We see spending go up. We're spending a lot to be involved in this kind of thing, and we see inflation higher right now. So surely that's a factor. But the main point here is that historically, it's paid dividends to stay calm in these situations and to not panic and start selling off things, because a large portion of the gains from these types of events come in the short window after. And that's the most important thing. If you don't have a team to work with who can talk you through these things, what you'll do is you'll sell last week. You'll sell a big portion last week thinking, oh my gosh, who knows what's going to happen? And then in 2 weeks, if this gets resolved, you miss a huge portion of those gains. And that might be a lot of the gains from the year. If we look at last year, the window after the tariff dip was almost 80% of the gains for the year, just in like a couple months. So the point is, in these situations, it's very important to stay calm, to understand the history, and that's what we do, right? That's what we're here for, is to talk our clients through the history and say, hey, we've seen 30, 40 of these types of events in the last 100 years, and almost every time the same outcome happens. So that's what we're here for. If you guys don't have a team of professionals who are focused on this, if you're in retirement, your job is to not understand the stock market history. That's our job, right? Our job is to understand exactly what to do in these situations before they happen, how to handle them while they're happening, and what to expect after. If you don't have something like that, please give us a call, because this stuff is stressful. We have people who are generally worried. Seriously, like it's scary stuff. So if you don't have something like this, give us a call. We'd be happy to be that steady rock for you through these times. And that's almost one of the most important things we can do for people in retirement.
Yeah. Great update, Mitch. And I'll tell you, it's so true that any retirement planning advisor can look great in good markets. But let me tell you when the good ones really shine, and that is when things aren't so great. And when things get volatile, that's when you know if your advisor's in direct communication with you, talking to you, making sure you understand their thought process. And for you guys to know, it's not just Mitch and I. Well, listen, we've got a team behind us of unbelievable investment people that are coaching us and talking to us on a daily basis, that is allowing us to really get the insight that is needed to make sure that we live, eat, breathe, and sleep this stuff, and that we understand what is changing and whether making any kind of move makes sense. All of our portfolios are actively managed by our team, meaning that they are making changes as they see fit to adjust to these markets on the fly, so that we make sure that we're not missing out on those really good days, because that's where the real mistakes happen. You get scared, you panic, you get out, and then you miss days like the past few days that we've had where things are just going straight up. And that is where it is so important to have an advisor that can really talk you through these situations, help you understand that it's not as bad as it seems, or it is as bad as it seems, but to really, give you solid information to make really good foundational, changes to what you're doing. And that's where a really good advisor shines, is in these tough moments. And, we hear from people all the time who say, it's in these tough moments I don't hear from my advisor. They just kind of go off the radar, and we don't know what's going on, and it makes us extremely anxious. And really, that's just not what people need. They need to be in constant communication, understanding what is going on and why they should or should not make changes to how they are allocated and what they're doing. So, all right, so that was great. Let's get back to our topic of the day, which is Social Security claiming strategies, and how detrimental it can be if you don't do this thing right, because this is one of the few decisions you're going to make as far as retirement income sources that cannot be undone and is made for life once it is made. So, we've already kind of gone over a lot of good stuff here. The next thing I want to talk about is common mistakes that we see people do when it comes to claiming their Social Security benefits. Number one on that would be claiming at age 62 just because you can.
Yeah.
We see it all the time. People hit that magic age of 62 and they say, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and claim my benefit because I can. And guys, we want to tell you that is more than likely, in most cases, majority of the time, a mistake to do that. You are taking a reduced benefit of 25 to 30% when you do that for life. And, there's just so much more optimal ways to do that. Like we said, unless you have serious health issues and you're just not sure whether you're going to make it to age 70, then that strategy of just claiming. And a lot of times people do it and they don't even need the income, Mitch.
Right.
I mean, if you don't need the income and you're just going to put that in an account somewhere and you're still working, say you're still working and you're earning decent income and you're already in a high tax bracket, then you're just putting yourself in a position to pay 85% of that payment that you're getting in Social Security is going to be taxable. So you're paying higher taxes on that check than you would normally. And if you're still, you're not full retirement age and you're still working and you're making over a certain threshold of income every year, which is in that $24,000 range, then you're going to be penalized for taking that check. So they'll take away $1 for every $2 you earn over, I believe.
And then it's $1 for every 3 at full retirement age.
Yeah. So, that's silly. That's silly. So think this stuff through before you go and make that kind of decision. The next, mistake we see is not coordinating spousal decisions. So you and your spouse not being on the same page. This is, if you are a married couple, this needs to be a joint decision.
It does.
You don't need to be off each doing your own thing, so to speak, and claiming whenever you think it makes sense. This is a very important decision when it comes to married couples because, again, we keep saying it, but the higher earning, spouse is making a very important decision for both people when they decide to elect their benefits. Because if a married couple is both receiving benefits and one of them passes away, the survivor gets the higher of the two Social Securities. So if you're the higher earner, you're making that decision for both of you. So that is very important to understand.
It is. And we see, we see that kind of thing all the time where people are like, hey, we both kind of do our own thing, right? We're married, but we kind of handle our money differently. And that's totally fine. We work with people like that all the time. But the one thing that is not going to change, like we keep mentioning, is that inevitably you're going to have one Social Security together. One of those two is going to go away at some point when one spouse passes. You can do all different things with the assets, and you can have different beneficiaries, you can have trusts, you can have all these different things, but the one thing you're going to count on being there is that Social Security payment. And so that has to be a team decision. Even if you want to do your own thing with assets and stuff, that the Social Security decision has to be a team effort.
Yeah, and if it's not, a lot of times it plays a serious role when it comes to tax planning for that.
It does.
Because if you're joint filing your taxes, which most married couples do, especially if they cohabitate,
right,
then you are the tax picture is a joint tax picture, and it's not going to change. So that can become a very, very important piece of tax planning and making sure that you're being as efficient as you can when you elect those benefits. Again, if you think you're confused about this stuff, you're not sure how to do this, just go to ClearPathRetirement.com, hit that Get Started button today, and let's have a conversation and let's make sure you're optimizing this. We'll be right back, guys. Are you a business owner with an email list you are not sure is actually growing your business? Most business owners are just guessing, sending emails, hoping for a click. At Kathy Farah Consulting, we take guesswork out of your email marketing. We help you identify what's working and fix what's broken, turning your list into a reliable engine for better leads and consistent sales. Stop wondering, start growing. Visit kathyfarah.com to book your free email clarity call today. Let's make your email marketing work smarter.
Thanks for tuning in to ClearPath Retirement Radio with Stewart Smith and Mitch Davies. Let's get back to the show.
Hey guys, welcome back into ClearPath Retirement Radio. I'm Stewart Smith. I'm here as usual with Mitch Davies, my co-host, and today we are talking all things Social Security claiming strategies and how to do that correctly and things to consider when you're at that critical point where you're making this decision. Because as we've said over and over again, this Social Security claiming decision is one that's for life.
It is, Stewart. And, we've been talking about spousal, working through the tax situation, especially as a joint filing. And something I wanted to bring up that goes in line with the spousal filing is we hear often, am I working just to pay Social Security? Does working really make sense? The situation I guess I'm referring to here is, say you're semi-retired and you're taking Social Security, and there's a lot of thresholds we have to manage, right, Stewart? There's a lot of, especially with the one big beautiful bill, there's a lot of income thresholds. So what we'll see happening is, someone's taking Social Security, they're partially retired, and maybe they're earning $15,000, $20,000. They don't really need the money, but they're just working. And what will happen in that instance is that could, if the other spouse is still working, that could start bumping you up into other thresholds for Medicare premiums, for losing the extra standard deduction gained from the one big beautiful bill, from a lot of other things. So when we sit down and plug in that income source into a comprehensive plan and we look at what is that really doing, that's probably raising taxes on Social Security. So some of that Social Security you're getting while working is being taxed, probably more now. B, bumping us into a higher overall tax bracket. C, maybe losing some standard deductions, some other benefits from being under certain thresholds. So when we look at what that $15,000, $20,000 looks like after all these things in conjunction with Social Security, we're like, hey, you're only really netting a few $1,000s here in benefit. Right. And we see that all the time. So it's very important to understand how Social Security interacts with income, especially if you're in that semi-retired phase, because we see this a lot these days where people are like, I'm just working for fun. I don't really know if I need to be doing this. And sometimes it's not helping as much as you might think.
Absolutely. We've seen that a lot. We were working with a client the other day who was very concerned about that and just kind of wanted to know, am I working just to pay more taxes, and,
right,
and how much of my income is going just to pay the higher taxes that I wouldn't have to pay if I wasn't working? And that is a really good question. That's the kind of questions that keeps people up at night, and that's the kind of questions that we help definitively answer for them. And, that takes real planning. There are so many thresholds that you're looking at here. Like Mitch said, it could be the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and the extra, $12,000 standard deduction that couples get over age 65 under certain income thresholds. It could be, going from paying 50% taxes to 85% taxes on your Social Security and what that threshold looks like. It could also, really impact, Roth conversion strategies and things of that nature that you're trying to dramatically reduce your lifetime taxes and pass on tax-free money to your heirs for, estate planning purposes. And all of these things are moving parts that you need to understand and really have your arms around if you're going to be making decisions and doing these kind of things. And I think that's where the type of planning that we do at ClearPath Retirement Planning just is second to none. And what we do as far as a level of planning to understand, it's taken me 2.5 decades to learn all of these things and understand all of the thresholds and all of the possible pitfalls that you could be falling into when you make these decisions. And so, I feel like that's where we really bring the greatest value to our clients, is that once they start working with us and they see the deep, level of planning that we do for them, and we point out all of these strategies and pitfalls that we can avoid by just really solid, good planning, they're amazed and really are so happy to have someone who truly understands this on the level that we do, working on their plans and making sure that they're really living the optimal retirement that's possible, avoiding a lot of these decisions that really can be huge mistakes. And one of those is not optimizing your Social Security and not really that can mean literally hundreds of thousands of dollars to you in retirement. And so we want to make sure that you're doing that right. We want to make sure that we're modeling through various scenarios and that we are definitely being as tax efficient as possible. And all of those things are extremely important. Because, again, as we've said before, Social Security is one of the largest income sources you'll have in retirement. And, you know, most people spend more time planning their vacation than they do deciding how to claim it.
They do. They really do, Stewart. And we've talked for the past hour about a few different Social Security things, and we could talk for 5 more hours about all the factors there are, right? But you're exactly right. The reason we're able to do what we do and focus so hyper-focus on all these different components is because, like you mentioned, we're fortunate to have an amazing team of people behind us that let us really spend all of our time optimizing these retirement strategies in specific. And if you're working with an advisor who isn't focused on retirement, who's working with all different types of people, that's great. But are they diving into these kinds of decisions this deep? Or are they just meeting with you once or twice a year and saying, hey, your accounts are up this year. Let me know if you need any money, you know? This is where, this is why I love working for ClearPath. Again, a locally owned firm here in Greenville, because we're able to really dive in and focus on these things. And when we get out of a meeting with clients, they're like, wow, I didn't even know half of this stuff existed and I would have never heard this. And why would you, right? This is what we do all day. So that's why I love being here.
Yeah. Here are a few engagement questions that I would have to ask you guys. And to start, I would say, hey, at what age are you planning to take Social Security and why? Do you know what your benefit would be at 62 versus 67 versus age 70? Have you considered how your decision affects your spouse? Those are great questions to consider. And if you haven't done it, I would go to SSA.gov, and that's SSA.gov, and create an account for yourself. You can do that within a matter of minutes, and then when you log into your account, you'll be able to pull down your latest estimate for what your Social Security benefits would look like at these various ages. So that's a good start to start getting your arms around this and start understanding this decision that you're making. And, once you do that, at least you have some data to go by. And I tell you, these estimates are usually pretty dead on.
They are.
They are. We're usually very, very useful in our analysis and how we start to look at the overall strategy of how we're going to optimize things. But start there, get yourself an account, get that estimate, the latest estimate downloaded. And once you have that, if you want some help, you want to understand it, you want us to sit down and do a full analysis, take a look at all these various moving parts that we're talking about, just come see us at ClearPathRetirement.com. Hit that Get Started button today. Set up a phone call or a one-on-one appointment with us, and let's get started having that conversation on how to optimize this benefit. This is a major decision, and it deserves a strategy, not a guess.
That's absolutely right, Stewart. And another thing with that, if you hear these questions, remember, you get a 1-year do-over. You get a 1-year get-out-of-jail-free card. So if you're listening to these questions and you just elected a few months ago for the first time ever, and you're like, hey, I didn't really have a why I'm taking Social Security. I didn't really think about the implications at 67 or 70. I didn't really think about how this would affect my spouse. If you just elected Social Security in the last year and you didn't have a clear answer to these questions or anything else we've talked about today, give us a call. We can run through the plan, run through different scenarios, and maybe see, hey, there was a better claiming strategy. So if you're within that 1 year, please give us a call. You've got time.
Yeah, and we have done it before. We've helped folks to fix this, and it is a little painful because, like we said before, you do have to pay back the money that you've received so far. But for a lot of folks, they can do that, and it's not a big deal. And then we get to hit the reset button and really go back at this thing with a real strategy on how we're going to do this stuff. And the other big mistake that we see here, Mitch, is that people fail to integrate their Social Security claiming decision with a real tax strategy.
That's right.
And that can be devastating in retirement because, again, tax efficiency in retirement is so important and so vital to your success on whether you're going to have the income you need to live the retirement that you've always dreamed about. And I can tell you that whether you pay 0, 50%, or 85% taxes on your Social Security, that's a big deal. 0 to 85% is a big deal. That's a lot of tax money that, if structured correctly and you're taking money from the correct accounts and you are, deploying Roth conversion type strategies where at some point you could even live that, what everybody dreams about, which is that tax-free retirement, which we've helped a lot of people achieve, then, that changes. And, now you go from paying 85% taxes on your Social Security to paying 0. And that's a huge deal. And if that can happen sooner rather than later, then that could be another huge impact. We're talking thousands and thousands of dollars a year that you would pay in taxes that you wouldn't have to anymore. And so let us take a look. Let us sit down, let my team take a look, and we can definitely help you through this and help you make the right decisions, help you optimize your Social Security. Again, if you're sitting around confused, you're hearing what we're saying, but you just don't really want to have to do this alone and you want some help, just give us a call, 864-775-5033, or visit ClearPathRetirement.com. Hit that Get Started button, and let's just have a conversation. Guys, this has been a great show. Hope you have learned a lot about Social Security, and until next week, happy retirement. Are you anxious to see what retirement might look like for you? Do you feel like you have the pieces of the puzzle, but you're not sure how they fit together or where to start? At ClearPath Retirement, we help you bring clarity to retirement by organizing your income, taxes, healthcare decisions, and legacy planning into one cohesive plan. Retirement doesn't have to feel uncertain. It just needs a clear path. Schedule your complimentary consultation at ClearPathRetirement.com.
You've been listening to ClearPath Retirement Radio with Stewart Smith and Mitch Davies, helping you make informed decisions so you can plan for retirement with confidence. To learn more, visit ClearPathRetirement.com. That's ClearPathRetirement.com. Investment advisory services offered through AlphaStar Capital Management, LLC, a SEC-registered investment advisor. SEC registration does not constitute an endorsement of the firm by the SEC, nor does it indicate that the advisor has attained a particular level of skill or ability. Fixed insurance products are offered through ClearPath Retirement Planning, LLC, and AlphaStar Capital Management is not involved in the offer, recommendation, sale, or management of commission-based fixed insurance products. AlphaStar Capital Management and ClearPath Retirement Planning, LLC are separate and independent entities. This is for informational purposes only and is not intended as legal, tax, or investment advice or a recommendation of any particular security, investment product, or investment strategy.